Ya'akov Shapiro, was the first one. I was the person who brought the shaila of the human hair sheitlach to Rav Elyashiv the first time he received it over 30 years ago. You asked me to tell the story, here it is. In Tufshin Memtes, I think it was the spring, in the spring of Tufshin Memtes, somebody in the shul, one of the mispalim in my shul, came over to me and told me that the Rav in the shul where he used to daven before he moved to Bayswater here, got up that past Shabbos and announced that all the human hair sheitlach that come from India are osur to wear. The reason he did, because he heard from one of his mispalim who was on a business trip and saw in some magazine that the vast majority of sheitlach that come from India come from Hindu temples, which involve avodah zarah. And based on this, this Rav Asard, at least tentatively. I called that Rav, and he told me whatever information he had, which was very little. But the shaila sounded serious. So I spoke to other Rabbonim that I had a shaykhus with very much in those days that I spoke to about shailas, Rav Shimon Schwab, Rav Hillel David, Rav Feivel Cohen. And basically we decided that we have to try to be mavar if we can what's going on. And I took it upon myself to do so. I found out that 20 years prior to that, which is about 50 years ago from today, Reb Moshe Sternbach wrote a tshuva on these sheitlach in a kuntris called Das Bahalocha. There he said that he heard that there's a whole process of avodah zarah involved, that the hairs are a sacrifice, a korban to avodah zarah. They're put on a mizbeach, something to this effect. I don't remember exactly. They're put on a mizbeach, but the galochim steal it and they sell it, and that's the sheitlach, that ends up the sheitlach that we have. I called Reb Moshe Sternbach then. He was living in South Africa, and we spoke on the phone. And he told me that he wasn't able to be mavar the metzias 100%. He's just basing it on what he heard. He said he would have to go to India. They told him he would have to go to India. But if I could be mavar the metzias, it would be a very good thing to do. And his answering the sheitlach was because his information was enough for him to consider it a sveika deiraisa. I remember the conversation after he described to me the process, and we spoke a little about it. I said, that's enough to make it avodah zarah. He said, quite possibly. We spoke in English. So the first thing I did was I went to the Indian embassy and I asked them if they could give me a list of people that export human hair from India. I didn't tell them why, but I got from them a connection that gave me the list, and I wrote to them. There was no email in those days. I wrote letters to them. How do you get your sheitlach? And I got letters back. I have a lot of the information still, not all of it, because honestly, it never dawned upon me then that 30 years later, there's going to be a major controversy about it. So I treated it like any other shaila. You're mavar, you keep some information, but I didn't keep meticulous records. I do have, though, these letters from the importers, and basically, yes, the majority, 60, 70, maybe more % of the hair that comes from India originates in these Hindu temples, mostly in Tirupati, in the Madras region in India, and it goes from there to Korea, if I remember right, and from Korea it goes to Europe and America. And all the hair originally is black, and even the colored sheitlach that are not black, it's because they're dyed various different colors. After that, I started looking around for Hindus. Both Stam Pashta Hindus. I knew one that worked in a gas station that I used to stop off for by gas, and others. And then I went to Hindu clergymen. I spoke to many Hindu Pashta people, many clergymen. They call them swamis. And there's a big, or was then, I don't know if they're still there, a big Hindu community in Queens, and an even bigger one, a very big one in Pittsburgh. I spoke to the people over there. And honestly, for the first few weeks, it seemed like it was a problem. They were talking in terms of sacrifices to the gods. The hair is a sacrifice. They didn't say that it's put on a altar or anything like that. There's something called a hunde in the temple or near the temple. There's this whole ceremony that they do with it. And it sounded bad, particularly because they were talking about sacrifice. However, upon further investigation, we realized that we weren't talking about a real avodah. The word sacrifice in Hindu, like in English, means two things. It means korban, and it means mesiras nefesh. When they were talking about sacrifice, upon further drisha v'chakira, we realized that they were talking about a mesiras nefesh, not korban type sacrifice. And in Hindu language, the edge between the two meanings is more blurred than it is in English. And that was the source of a lot of confusion. Many of the swamis that I spoke to pointed me to somebody who they said was the biggest mumcha in Hindu religion in America, Dr. Anand Mohan, who was a professor in CUNY then, if I remember right, Queens College. And again, in general, if any of the exact details I'm not remembering 100%, that's possible. But the details the points that matter, that I'm certain of. Maybe it was Queens College, a different college, those type of things, I may not remember exactly. I think it was Queens. He told me, he explained to me the entire process in a way that all the ambiguities and all the steers and all the kashas that we had on what we heard before were answered. Basically, yes, this is a way for the cutting of the hair is not a religious ceremony. The way this works is that the women who, when something bad happens in their life, or maybe something good also, I don't remember, but when some type of event happens in their life, they have to give something of themselves. It doesn't have to be hair. They could give, like a nadova, a gold bangle, I remember he said, a gold bangle. They can give some jewelry, whatever they want. The problem is that many of these women don't have any gold bangles. They're poor. But what they do all have is a long head of hair that's worth something. So what they do is they give away their hair. But even when we say give, it's not like in a dova where you give money to a shul that a shul should put up in their tamid. It's not where the money goes that the point is. The point is that they have to, like, it's like a tinus, like to give up something, to be mavater on something, to lose something, kind of like sigufim sort of thing, where they have to just throw away something that's valuable to them, be mavater on it, and that's the ceremony. The hair that itself is not holy according to the Hindu religion. In fact, it's tameh according to the Hindu religion, and it's not allowed in the temple. And if I remember right, he said something about them having to go to some purification process, a type of mikveh thing, if I remember right, afterwards because of the tumah. but it's certainly not a korban, and it's certainly not an act of avodah zarah. The question was whether the cutting of the hair is doimah to shviras makel, and that itself would be an act of avodah zarah. It clearly was not. There was a lot of confusion that I was confused at the beginning because of the language differences. Even people who knew English and translated it, the connotations are different. But when this guy explained it to me, all the different ambiguities made sense. When I spoke to them, sometimes I got steerers. One was saying, well, we give it to the gods. What does it mean you give it to the gods? If you give it to the gods, I asked, so what is it doing in America as wigs? Well, the gods don't really take it, but we give it to the gods. So one said it's a sacrifice to the gods. If it's a sacrifice, what's it doing here? Like, there were a lot of kashas, and the people I spoke to, many of them could not explain it well, and I figured, okay, could be their steerers. It's not a Rambam that everything shtims everywhere. It's their Torahs is aniyim b'makom zeh, aniyim b'makom acher. So they're steerers. So what? Okay, so steers in the religion. All I wanted to do was collect the mitzias, and if there were steers, let there be steers. We'll decide what the halacha is after we know what the shaila is. You can't know the true until you know the shaila. But it was clear after a while that it wasn't. The main part of this giving of the hair or the bangles or whatever is not that it goes for part of the main this hair cutting or this giving, this nadava that they give, is not like when a person, like we say, somebody gives to a donation to make an ner tomid in a base medrash. He gives either ner tomid or he gives money for it. It's not the vort. The vort is not that the goal is not that the church, the temple, or the avodah zarah should gain something. The goal is they should lose something. It's more of a tinus, like the hair. It's more of it's a vayetze, not a vayelech. The temples take the hair and they sell it to make money. But it's not because the goal of the cutting of the hair is to find money to give the temple. It's not. It's to find something for them to lose. It's like a tinus where the person's fat is reduced. So they need to reduce either their bank account, their jewelry box, or their hair, their something that's valuable to them. And the reason why the barber shops are near the temple is simply because it's more convenient for the temple to collect the hair and to ship it off and sell it. It's a very, very big business, but it's not part of this is not part of the avodah. In Pittsburgh, they told me again that the women can go to any barber shop in the street. And they do sometimes in other places besides Tirupati, where the temples don't need to establish barbershops because it's part of their business. We found there are many rabbonim involved, and one of the rabbonim here in the neighborhood, one of the yeshivas, Rabbi Per, he found either a ger or a Baal Tshuva who was once a Hindu, I don't remember exactly. We found someone in Los Angeles. We found different gerim, Balei Tshuva, or people that just dabbled in it, professors. There was somebody in my shul who knew someone who was studying then in Harvard University that inquired over there, and they got a letter back from a professor, Diana Eck, who was some kind of mumcha in religions or something, and she explained it, and mumchim from other universities. And even though we know that if you go to the professors and the academics and ask them about Yiddishkeit, you're not going to get anything close to what the reality is. Nonetheless, in this particular case of the Hindu religion, where it's relevant to this tanshering process, the professors, the academics, the Hamaynam Hindus, the Galochim Hindus. This Anand Mohan was a ordained Hindu priest, and his wife was one of the people that went to Tirupati and got a haircut, besides being a professor. And it was, even though everybody basically told us the same story. Everybody told us the same story. When we delved into it enough to understand what was going on, there were no discrepancies and no steers anymore. And we were satisfied that it was mutter, looked mutter, but I sent the Shaila upon speaking to Rav Schwab and other Rabbanim. Rav Schwab was then like the Zokin Harabonim in America, to Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rav Elyashiv, and Reb Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg. All of them mattered. Rav Elyashiv was the only one that wrote a full tshuva on it, and he gave it then. I gave to my shliach to give Rav Elyashiv, to hand him the information, my letter, my cover letter, and the whole bunch of information I sent him. I said, this is what I know, this is what I heard, you decide, tell me what the halacha is. Reb Leizer Stefanski from Lakewood. Rav Elyashiv addressed his tshuva to Reb Leizer Stefanski, and he matted. He said, first of all, the barbers really are the ones that are doing the act of Shviras Hamakal over here, because they're doing the haircutting. It's, by the way, something that the Rabbanim, we spoke about this a lot between ourselves, and many Choshev Rabbanim were involved. And none of them thought of this svara that Rav Elyashiv said. He says, what does it have to do with the women? If the shaila is, if the act of cutting the hair is an avodah zarah, if the question is the kavanah of the person who does the act of cutting the hair, has nothing to do with the women. It's the barbers. And even if the women are such amaratzim, they don't understand their religion and they think it's some kind of sacrifice to the god, the barbers are just barbers. In fact, there's no law in Hindu that the barbers have to be a Hindu. The barbers are just paid people. They are established along the perimeter outside of the temple. They're not allowed in the temple because since hairs are unholy, they're not allowed in the temple. And the women go there, and the barbers cut. Here in Pittsburgh, they told me, you know what, they don't even have to have, women sometimes don't even use the temple barbers. They can go to the local barber shop on the street, have their hair cut, and bring their hair to the temple. And the main thing is that they lose something. A woman with a full head of hair, much like Yifas Toya, she cuts off her hair, she becomes, she loses something. That's the point of this whole thing. And for various other reasons, but he said clearly, Rav Elyashiv, it's a davar poshet, that it's totally in the Metzias, and he's being soymech on the Metzias that I presented to him. He even mentioned in his tshuva Dr. Anand Mohan. I have the tshuva over here, and here's what he says. Al davar hashayla imutal ishtamish b'peis nochris hasuyos misarei sehen shel oivdei alilim hagorim b'hoidu shemistaprim lavoid zor shalahem imein bahem mishum takrovis lavoid zor v'asurim bahano vaday etzem hashayla toli b'metzius be'eza oifen heim oisen zois. That's the first thing he wrote. Omnam k'foy teirosei tziruf l'mechtovei chavis das shel echad hayodua k'mumcha hachi godol b'nyonei hoidu Dr. Anand Mohan. Lefi dvarav nesinas hasaris eino begeder korban elo begeder nedova v'im ira liechad ezet soro oy simcha, etc. They menada davar choshev lavoid dezor going kli zohov ukli zohov v'kesef kach yesh shemenadrim sarei sehen lefi chukei hahindu also l'noshim legaleach sarei sreshen ki im. Not clear. It means in this case, this is the only time they're allowed to cut their hair. That's why they all have such long hair. Okay. Rav Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg mattered. He himself said that I got this Baal Peh, he himself said that he spoke to either a ger or a Baal Tshuva, I don't remember, and matched our story. Reb Shlomo Zalman gave me his answer Baal Peh too through his shliach, a Rabbi Portnoy. I don't know if he told me all his reasons. He did not write a full tshuva like Rav Elyashiv did, but he mentioned the svek sveka. Suffolk if it's the hair is from India, and Suffolk if it's avodah zarah, because they're even if you do speak to them and they tell you something like an avodah zarah, it still would only make it a Suffolk. I had a kasha on that. It's Suffolk echad begufos, Suffolk echad betaruvos, and everybody was happy. I a mutter, and what I did was I took all the answers that I got and I wrote bekitza the mitzias, and I sent back a letter to Rav Moshe Sternbach. He answered me in a tshuva which is printed in his tshuvas v'hanhogas, and he still would not matter. He said that even though al pi chukei ha Hindus, it could be that this is not avodah zarah, but we need to find out the das of the women themselves. And he would not. I told him what I found, but this is what he wrote me back. I have here, this is the Ksav Yad from Rav Moshe Sternbach, the letter that he sent me. I still have it. Hine kvoy terose bodak l'shmoya shuras dosom va'ani boidik mahu ritzoin hamizgaleach ulfisha shamati. He heard different information. Afshal fi dosom hoikr loyli kones hasaros shehin tmeos l'divreihim lebeis alilim hamizgalchois royos mesiros nefesh va'avoida be'etzem hagiluach lehis navel. It's an avoida to lose something. V'lachein of the samuch lebeis halilim shira mesiras nafsham avuroi v'yoz yazu lahem. And the tshuva you could find in Tshuvas Van Hogus, it was written Rish Chodesh Sivan Tafshin Nun. The whole tshuva. So Moshe Sternbach, he was the only one of the Rabbonim of the Poskim, that still answered. I remember I spoke then to Rav Kreisworth in Antwerp. He also was satisfied that it's mutter, and various other Rabbonim. So pretty much the case was closed. It took about a half year, but the case was closed. I also heard, by the way, from Rabbonim that the reason why they wanted a aser is because they really hold the sheitlach or oster stamazoi and stama pritzus. This way, they'll get the women not to wear sheitlach. At the beginning, they thought that European sheitlach, they're very expensive, and what's going to happen is that the women won't be able to wear sheitlach. They'll have to, with kupkas or the svardin, the mitpachat. I remember one of the Rabbonim, I don't want to say who, he said it's going to be a very big problem to tell everybody that, because even though in the Torah it says, Lo saguru mipnei ish, he says that's like a shira, but Lo saguru mipnei isha. We're also Lo saguru mipnei ish, but Lo saguru mipnei isha, he says there's no such thing. He was joking, of course, but that's what people thought, that there wouldn't be any more sheitel. The average person wouldn't be able to afford a sheitel. Well, a lot of people wouldn't, and there were Rabbonim who I know, they told me that they want this to be also because of that reason. I'm not saying that everybody was motivated by that, not in the slightest. Somebody holds its also, he holds its also, but there were those that wanted to answer it because of that. Everything was quiet for about 15 years. Well, there was, 15 years after that, the Dayan Donner brought the Shaila again. And if I remember right, not 100% sure, if I remember right, Rabbi Moshe Sternbach was also involved then again, but then he was in Eretz Yisrael full time by that time. He went to India and he came back and told Rav Elyashiv a completely different Metzius than that which we told Rav Elyashiv. And based on the Metzius that Rabbi Donner told him, he asked the Sheitlach. I spoke then to some of Rav Elyashiv's people, and I read, it was all over. Then it was already all over the frum outlets, in magazines and on radio, about the big tumult about the Sheitlach. It was much bigger tumult than it was 15 years prior to that. I guess the reason is because Lamaisa, we ended up mattering, except for Moshe Sternbach. Now they ended up assering, so it was a big tumult. There was by us it was just Sheval Taisa. By now was so they publicized in various Jewish magazines. They had an interview with Rabbi Donner, and there was a meeting with Rabbonim. I was not at the meeting. I don't remember why I didn't go. I just didn't go. Where he explained what he found as the Metzius, and I knew, and those Rabbonim that were working with me then, or that I was in touch with then, as the information would come in, we knew every drop that was coming in, and we saw things that he said that we had. It was mostly our Havaminas. It was mostly the Havaminas I had. Now, when Rav Elyashiv asked, people were asking what changed. And what changed was that the maskonas that we had, the havaminas that we had then, that we realized were not true, became the maskonas now. The rayas that they had, that it's avodah zarah, we either knew that were just not the case. It was just not true. Like they said that they burned hair on the mizbeach. That just wasn't true. Or that there were pictures of women bowing their heads at the barber shop. The reason they bowed their heads was not bowing like avodah zarah, in order for the barber to be able to more easily get the hair all around the head. And the reason why the barber shops are near the temple is not, our information clearly is not the same as what Reb Moshe Sternbach heard. He heard that it's because the cutting is related to the temple and they want a proximity there. No, it's because the temple wants the hair. There was a meeting, Reb Feivel Cohn was there, so I wasn't there. I heard Reb Feivel Cohn asked, do you think the barber is chayav misa? And he said no. Do you think the woman who went to the barber is chayav misa? He said no. So he said, so we have an interesting thing. We have an avodah zarah. It's also another tekrobat, and nobody's chayiv misa for being makar of this avodah zarah. It was a very strange thing. I remember. Then part of the problem was that when they printed Rav Elyashiv's tshuva, for whatever reason, I don't know why, they erased the name of Anand Mohan. They wrote doctor like ... or ... which led people to believe and to say that the mumcha hachi godel that Rav Elyashiv was talking about was some kind of academic, as opposed to the actual Hindus themselves, which was false. He happened to be a professor, but he was also a Hindu priest. And again, his wife went to Tirupati, fully observant Hindu, and a big mumcha, not als academic, but als Hindu. This man was a Hindu priest. His wife is a Hindu. He's a practitioner. Happens to be, his title is doctor because he's a professor. But Dalmahocha, his being a professor. And there were a lot of things that just were out of control. I remember, so I publicized that the original mumcha was Anand Mohan. Nobody knew this because it was erased from Rav Elyashiv's tshuva, and nobody knew. I was the only one who knew, and the people who were involved with me. So I publicized it. Anand Mohan ended up getting interviewed on a Jewish radio show, Zev Brenner. And he said, I remember him saying something like this. He said, look, people called him and asked him, is it Avodah Zarah? He said, look, I am not here to tell you what is permitted and prohibited, what's Avodah Zarah according to your religion. I'm not telling you that. I don't know. I'm not a rabbi. I'm here to tell you that I'm not here to tell you it's not whether it's Avodah Zarah in your religion. I'm here to tell you that it's not Avodah Zarah in my religion. That's all. I'm paraphrasing him. That's what he said. He said clear. I'm not here to explain what the Jewish religion says. I'm here to explain what the Hindu religion says. And the Hindu religion, this has nothing to do with idols or sacrifices or anything holy at all. That's not the point. Sacrifice, like he said, there's this word in Hindu, which of course I don't remember, which is similar to the word sacrifice in English in that it means both korban and mesiras nefesh. And he said there's no exact translation for it in English. It means like a giving something, like a mesiras nefesh kind of thing. I would not know how to explain it better than he did because I don't know what the word means. I don't speak Hindu. If I did, maybe I could find some words in English that could describe it better than he did. Similar to levater, to give up something, like we would say self-sacrifice in English. Somebody gives a lot of money, he sacrificed something. Somebody wakes up in the morning, it's sacrificing, that type of thing. It doesn't mean korban, but the usage and is different. It's different in Hindu. He said you can't really translate, but it's along those lines, what it's not. The ikar is what it's not what it is. The ikar is it's not a korban, it's not avodas halilim, it's not anything to do with that. It's like more like a tainus or a sigufim or being mavater on something, somewhere in between there. Plenty, it's not enough. That's what I learned. It's not enough to just hear their words. You have to understand their religion and what they mean. Imagine somebody came over to a Jew and he's dancing in the street and he asks him, what is he doing? He says, I'm being Mekadesh Levana. What's Mekadesh Levana? I'm sanctifying the moon. That's not what it means. And it's worse yet, if this Chacham who asked goes home and starts looking up, what does Kiddush mean? What does Kiddushin mean? Well, sanctifying Levana. He's dancing. It's a chasana. He's dancing and by Levana, and he's being Mekadesh Levana, right? So it's the same thing over there. That's what I learned. You have to know. It's not good enough to hear somebody, some Amoritz Hindu explain something. I don't remember. I don't remember exactly what I heard. I don't remember that I heard this then at all. All the things I did hear, I wrote down. We sent to Rav Elyashiv to the poskim. I don't remember this being it, but I can't swear it wasn't. The same simple people said it's a sacrifice we give, but that's all they knew. Mohan said then to me, he says, these people, and some of the Swamis said too, they themselves don't know. Also, if you ask a Yid, imagine it happens so much, right? A guy interviews a Jew about something he does, and the Jew doesn't really even know why he does it, right? Why is he dancing by Kiddush Levon and David Melech Yisrael? He'll say something, but it's not real. They don't really know. They'll just say something. It's a mitzvah. We do this. And really, the truth is that, I'll tell you a story. I had another Maisa like this with different Shaila. I found out in a river in Virginia, there grows beautiful aravas, arvei nachal, red stems, beautiful green leaves, straight out of the river. And when I was a younger man, I was just married. I decided, me and some friends, that we're going to make money. We're going to go down to Virginia. We're going to cut down the aravas. We'll sell them for sukkahs. There was a problem. You can't do it without Rishus. You can't just randomly steal Aravis. So we called the Parks Department, who was in charge, and they said, oh, please, gladly, we don't want those Aravis here. They block the canoe routes. But here's the problem. One thing, it costs, you have to get a permit. A permit costs $10, it was then, but it takes 3 weeks to get. Okay? And there wasn't enough time. So now here's the shaila. If, let's say, we were to go down, cut the Aravis without the permit, would that be Arava Gzula? In other words, is the pshat, they're not makbid on the Aravis. They want the Aravis gone. They're makbid on the money. So we didn't get a permit. That was the avla there. But taking the, it's not, or the pshat is no, without the permit, they're makbid on the Arava. I had a raya Rashi, I wanted a time, I had a raya from a Rashi in Brachas. I told this to Rabbi Yisrael Yankev Fisher then. He said, Rashi says in the Gemara, if a person that's called Nenemoil and Hazabloy Bracha, Kilu Gozal, right? He gozal from Hashem. Rashi says, what did you steal? You stole the bracha. He doesn't say you stole the food. Why did Rashi say that? Pshat is because the Rebbeinu Shloim isn't makbid that you shouldn't eat the food. It's not like you have to buy the food from him. He wants you to have the food. Adrabah gesund to hate. What he's makbid on is the bracha. The bracha is the permit. The food, he says, gesund to hate. So from there, it's the same situation. There, gozal, you gozal the bracha. It's not that you gozal the food. Even though without the bracha, you're not allowed to have the food. The bracha is the permit, and the food's the arava. That was my, I'm not saying the halacha, but that was what I was thinking then. So what happened was, I remember I called it was a judge in a very high court in that state. It was Virginia or West Virginia. And I asked him the question. I said, where's the hakpada? He said he understands the question perfectly, but there is no answer. Because they don't think in those terms. All they know is this. They don't, when they make these laws, there's no lumdis on we makbid on the arava, we're makbid on the money. All they know is they want to make money. It can't be a hefgevelt. You can't just come in and cut stuff down. You need a permit. They'll make some money. You have to get the permit to take it. More than that, they don't think. There is no lumdis. There's just the pshat tovna. That's all there is. That's it. Period. Okay. So now what the halach is then is another story. But that's what they said. Oh, these hamoinam, to them, this is the way they think. Maybe some of them think it's giving to a god. Look, I don't know. In order to know what they think, I interviewed, and the other people involved interviewed maybe a dozen, probably more, hamoinam. Guy who worked in a Getty station on Route 9 was the first person, because I used to get gas over there. Random people. The Swamis, the more educated they were, the more they knew, but nobody said that they really, and then that they really, I don't remember. I don't remember that people saying that when we really got down to it and put them against the wall, are you saying this is like being makriv avodah zarah? I don't remember people saying that. Could be somebody did, but that information was sent to the post. You remember, Rav Elyashiv says it doesn't matter what they think. The ikar is what the barber thinks. Mm-hmm. But oh yeah, I do remember there was something like avodah zarah betois. I do remember saying that. Now, there was one of these people that said something like that, and then I followed up. I got back to them and I said, I spoke to Swami. I said, I spoke to the Swami, and he says this is okay, then that's the pshat. Fine, I don't remember if she said, oh, that's what I meant, or that's what, okay, now I'm asking, or okay, but it was like they don't think into it. That's what we found. And even those that do, when you really ask them, it's not, this for sure, I could say bebriris, it's not good enough to listen to the words that they say. That's like a yid saying, I'm being mekadosh levona. What in the word does that mean? Translate, I'm sanctifying the moon. do you have a better way to explain Kiddush Levon? You're sanctifying the moon. That's what you may tell somebody. What does that mean to somebody? Completely not what Kiddush Levana is. He won't understand. You said the truth, right? It's worse in the Hindu religion. It's worse than that. That's what I did find out. So before you say, well, this guy said this, and therefore this is what it means. I was in that situation for the first few weeks, few months that I was looking into it. I also fell for that mistake. But then when we spoke to the Mumchim, we spoke to them back, we found out that it doesn't work that way. Anyway, Rav Feivel Cohen goes to Rav Elyashiv then. And he tells him that we know the Metzias is different than the way you paskin, than based on what you paskin now. And when Rav Feivel Cohen got back, he told me that Rav Elyashiv said, and I'm paraphrasing now, look, I'm not the FBI. I didn't go and investigate this. This is what somebody told me. I'm paskening the Shaila according to what's presented to me. And if you know the Metzias is different, then you can say it's mutter. And what's the Shaila? Somebody goes to Rav Elyashiv. Has a Shaila. He says, I need to know the answer now, because if I go home and tell my wife, she'll be very angry. I washed a very choshev fleischige dish with a milchige sponge. Rav Elyashiv asks him the questions, and he says, Osir, you got to throw away the dish. He comes back, his wife gets home, and he's all angry, right? He's all angry. He's all scared. His wife's going to be angry. And he says, he told her the story, and she's smiling. He says, why are you smiling? He says, this sponge you used, it's not a milchige sponge. It's not a fleischige sponge. It's a milchige sponge. So now what? She's being chaylik on Rav Elyashiv. She's not being chaylik on Rav Elyashiv. Machlokes Rav Elyashiv and the wife, if it's you mechuyev to throw out the dish now. It's not a machlokes. How do you listen to the wife, Rav Elyashiv paskin? No, Rav Elyashiv paskin this shaila. People do it all the time, by the way. People do it all the time. They go to poskim, or rabbonim, mostly for das Torah things, and they give them a false story, and it comes back with something, and then you say, they give you a baba maisa, which is based on something that never happened, and you say that never happened. You say, oh, you think you can fool him? Not a question of fooling him. You asked him a shaila, and he answered the shaila, but that's not the Metzias. So you ask somebody a shaila. I found a $1 bill in Times Square. Am I allowed to keep it? Yes, you're allowed to keep it. Fine. Now, the guy gets into my car, steals my car, and drives away with it. And I say to him, why are you stealing my car? He says, Rav Elyashiv said I could steal your car. What do you mean? I asked him a shaila. I said, if I find a $1 bill in Times Square, can I keep it? He said, yes. I said, that wasn't how you, but I meant not a $1 bill. I meant your car. And I meant not find if I can go in it and take it away. And he said, yes. I said, but you didn't ask him the facts. Oh, you're saying you could fool Rav Elyashiv? Rav Elyashiv has Ruach HaKodesh. He knows what's going on. How do you say? No, that's mamish what people do. That's what people do. They go to a posik and they tell him one story, and then when you tell him, no, you fooled the posik, they say, what do you mean? He has Ruach HaKodesh. How could you fool him? You didn't fool him. You fooled yourself. You're allowed, if you know the Metzias. So Rav Feivel Cohen came back, and that was that. So at the end, what happened was Rav Elyashiv said what he said, and it's totally in the Metzias, like Rav Elyashiv told me, and he told Rav Feivel Cohen. And as far as I'm concerned, the Metzias is the way our research came out, and I have not heard anything to change anybody's minds. But prat, based on Rav Elyashiv's tshuva, where he said you have to know the person making the haircut. Nobody thought of that, by the way. Nobody thought of that. None of the Rabbanim involved thought of that.
After it was talking to Rav Duner, then he changed his mind. He said that if the woman thinks about avodah zorah, and the barber dealing with her, that means that he is a part of what she thinks. And therefore what he does is coming along with what she thinks, and then it becomes a meiser of avodah zarah.
Well, that could also be, I don't know what they told Rav Elyashiv. If they told him like what Rav Moshe Sternbach heard, that the whole thing is part of the thing, and the barber is involved himself. But let's say a woman goes to a regular barber shop on Central Avenue, okay, like in Pittsburgh, and she's thinking mamash avodah zarah. The barber has no idea what's avodah zarah. Would Rav Elyashiv in that case say she didn't even tell the barber what she's doing?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what they told Rav Elyashiv. I don't know exactly what the metzius was, or what they. I mean, I know what the metzius of what they told him was. All I know is that we interviewed all these people, and either on the surface or even deeper, it came out that even what they meant, they either weren't thinking deep, or they didn't know what they were talking about, or they just gave us milsadim spashe b'treyanpe. But it's not avodah zarah.